All right, so I'm already logged in on our development server in the Rich Data Services Manager. There's a couple of ways to add things to Rich Data Services. One is through the API and using applications like Postman and others, or you can use the UI, which is the RDS Manager, which is what I'm going to do today. So I've already created a catalog for the Medicare and Medicaid services. So in RDS, data lives in different catalogs. We have a bunch of them. This is your development server. And I'm going to go to the US Center for Medicare and Medicaid services. And this is the catalog itself. So we have two data products to add, one for each of the tables. I'm only going to show one for the purpose of this exercise. And I'm going to simply go to add data product, and there's various things we can add. In this case, I'm going to use a SQL database, and I'm going to do continue. And there's a few parameters we need to provide here to RDS. One is the connection string. This is how the Rich Data Services server can connect to the database. We have a Postgres database. This is the string, the port, Postgres, and the schema we are using is US. The table name is a CMS provider, CLIA. Remember, we're going to use the view, not the physical table directly. I'm going to put the short password in here, and our user is Postgres. Now, I need to give a unique identifiers to this data product, so I'm going to call that the same thing, CMS provider CLIA, and I need to give it a name, so let's call that CMS provider CLIA, and we can enhance all these things later down the road. But this essentially is going to connect RDS to our database view where the data is. I'm just going to do create, and now I don't need to save all these things here. You see the process is 100% complete. So if I reload my catalog, I can view the data products. And if I go under Center for Medicare, this database table has been registered. Know that the data is there. I can go into a couple of other APIs. It's available through the RDS API, but we don't want to dive into that at this point. So I'm going to use just simply the RDS Explorer to see what the data looks like. So the Explorer allows you to see record level data and do various operations on the records and create subsets and download the data. So I'm going to go here, and I have the provider CLIA, and this is the data we have loaded in our database table as expected. Now, this is data, and remember we did that all the metasheet work to document all these variables. If you would just get the data file, like the CSV file, this is what you get. One of the advantages of a Rich Data Services platform is that we can combine data and metadata. So instead of seeing these codes and things like that, what I'm going to do is now go back to the manager and add metadata, import metadata. This is where you remember where we're using Metasheet. We generated this provider CLI DDI file, which is a standard to capture metadata around data. It's called the Data Documentation Initiative. So all the metadata that we need that was in Metasheet has been stored in this file, so in a standard format. So what I'm going to do is simply import this file. And now the DDI file is being loaded in, is being added to the metadata repository associated with this data product. And now the metadata has been loaded. So the advantage of this is if I go back here and I look at the dictionary, you're going to see that all the variables now have labels and description. The same thing if I go to the RDS Explorer, instead of seeing this, if I reload the page, now we get the application is able to retrieve both the data and the metadata. And for example, for the provider category, we can see CLI laboratory. You can see for the compliance status code, instead of A and B, you can actually see the meaning of all these different codes. I can display both the codes and the label at the same time, which I'm going to do here. So remember, this was the original data. This is the data with the metadata. And you can see now that all these codes have meaning. The same thing, for example, for the region code 04 Atlanta, state code, SSA code, and this is true for all the variables. If I go to the data dictionary, you're going to see that all the variables, again, have a name, a label, a description. And for the ones that have, for example, associated with the classification, you can go and you're going to see the different codes and the labels. So this is basically bringing data and metadata together in rich data services. One more thing you can do now, this is kind of the record level browsing app. We have another application which allows you to do quick tabulation, and it's called the Tab Engine, which is right here, correct? Yes. So if I go here, this allows me to quickly create tables or cross tabulations on the same data set. So for example, this is useful for quality assurance, but also obviously for analysis as well. In my case, I'm just doing quick quality assurance to see what's in the data set, and I can start playing with this a little bit. For example, at the row level, I'm going to create a table, and let's see, I'm going to take one of the state variable, let's say the state FIPS code. Here we go. I'm going to use that a row, I'm going to tabulate, and immediately it's going to the database, and now I can see the count of the CLIA providers across the different states. I could add another column, for example, compliance status. Let's add this. And now you can see the number of providers in compliance and not in compliance, and apparently a lot of them don't have values. So that's another interesting question. So we also have missing values, which is fairly common and not unusual. But if I'm an analyst or a researcher, I may want to investigate this a little bit more. And this pretty much concludes what we wanted to do. So we went all the way from the CSV files that we found on the CMS website to having the ability now to access the data through web application, through a rich data services API, to download the data in various formats and do a lot of things. And this is immediately usable by researchers or scientists or analysts. We don't need to go through the few hours of data wrangling that we just went through. So our next step would be to do the same thing with the other table, probably look into some of the issues we have discussed and pointed out around some of the codes that we need to fix. Again, like if you go in this provider subtype, we need to remember combined codes, and especially in the other file. So we might fix all that, look a little bit deeper about how we can put these data products in a super useful shape. And this is likely going to be at some point on our public rich data services server. So once this video is published and that work is completed, just look in the video description, and if and once the data is available publicly, we will post a link in the video description. So thank you very much for your attention. Hopefully this was helpful. See a little bit of behind the scene work around data wrangling and metadata capture and why we are doing all these things. And please leave us a comment, contact us if you have any question or suggestion. And hopefully looking forward to see you in another video. Thank you for your attention.